All right, it's our final chapter reviews. This is chapter 12, and it's on our social welfare policy. This is where our government provides programs to help everyone have a more quality type of life. It provides educational support, economic support, and healthcare support. You think anything back in history, you may have heard something called the New Deal. Those programs were done by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it was in response to what happened during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The states were not able to combat all of the unemployment and the poverty that was overtaking them. And so the government, federal government, had to step in and help rejuvenate basically our economy. And so in 1933, unemployment rate was about 25%. Okay. A lot of things happened. There were some banking issues. The Secretary of Treasury began to oversee bank transactions because banks were closed because there was no money coming in. So banks were not making any loans. They weren't able to assist any businesses or people for that matter. So the government had to step in for that. You had what was known as the Civil Works Administration, the CWA. That was started in November of 1933. And what did it do? It employed about 4 million people. It paid them a living wage back in that time, which was about $15 a week. However, people felt like the wages was too high, and so that program that had employed 4 million people folded in 1934. So it was only around for 1 year. Then you have something called the Works Progress Administration, the WPA. In that particular program, you could earn up to $55 a month. It hired about 30% of those that were still unemployed. And this came after the Civil Works Administration. This came after that, and it lasted until around 1942. And it really was something that helped improve our hospitals and airfields and things of that nature. You may not be concerned about this now, but you should be. Social Security insurance program for older Americans, and it was started just in 1935. Payroll tax, everybody pays that payroll tax on workers at that time, except for government workers, farmers, and domestic labor. Had a lot of this happen. Uninsured unemployment insurance and compensation comes about. Excuse me. With the passage of the Social Security Act of 1935, there was an insurance fund created for unemployed workers. Payroll taxes is deducted from your paycheck and placed in a fund for unemployed workers. So what we're dealing with right now is that a lot of people who were working had paid into this unemployment fund, which unfortunately no one expected so many people to be out of work at the exact same time, which is why the stimulus package from the government was so needed, not only once, but several times. And unfortunately, our government has not done what it needed to do. Well, I shouldn't say our government, the Senate. The House has passed several COVID relief bills and stimulus packages that are just sitting in the office of Mitch McConnell because he's in charge of the Republican Party and they don't want to vote on anything. So you have all these people that are laid off. So we're back here again in 1935, 1942 time frame. That's what it feels like in terms of how we need to take care of our people. So you had something that was known as AFDC, which was Aid to Families with Dependent Children. It was set up to help. It was originally set up to help widow mothers and mothers with disabled husbands, probably husbands that come back from war that were disabled. So it was originally set up for widowed mothers, mothers whose husbands had died, and or mothers who had disabled husbands. The key word here is mothers, not just women. And money was not originally meant for unwed mothers. And so the original concept was to assist those whose husbands had died or whose husbands were disabled. 1960, Lyndon Johnson fought poverty and racial injustice. He wanted a better life. He expanded Social Security and he passed over 78 programs during that time. Welfare reform came about in 1996. Some people say that it encouraged people not to work. I don't know. 27% of the women that were on the program remained there for 6 to 9 years. So then it changed its name to TANF, which was Temporary Aid to Needy Families. So what was the goal? To get you prepared for a job, for work, marriage. After you had been on the program for 2 years, it required you to find a job. You could only be on it for up to 5 years. And so it should have been a springboard for families to get themselves, if they found themselves a job lost or whatever, it was to give them the support they needed to make it to the other side. Healthcare, Medicare, and Medicaid was passed in the 1960s. The difference between the two, Medicare is the public health insurance used by the elderly and disabled. That's Medicare. Medicaid assists the poor and elderly to pay bills, medical bills. Medicaid, states set the standard. Medicare, public health insurance, used for the elderly and disabled, pays for hospital visits and doctor's visits. So when you hear about the Affordable Care Act and whether or not a state such as Texas not expanding Medicare, this is what they're talking about. This is what they're talking about. Medicare expansion, Medicaid expansion, because what it did not do, Medicaid expansion, had they expanded it, more people would have been covered insurance-wise and would not have been walking around without coverage. State and local governments oversee our education. 90% of our resources for education comes from the government. Know that 90% of what's happening in our institutions, funding-wise, comes from the government. The goal is that you want to be able to use the monies from our taxes to help fund our education system. The problem with that is that money still needs to be distributed evenly, in my opinion, so that all school districts have access, whether they're in a poor school district or an affluent school district. The children don't have anything to do with that. And they still need to have access and be able to learn at such a rate that they are learning on grade level, reading on grade level, and doing all the things they need to do. Then you have what's known as the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the taxing and spending of money. Government spends one of every 4 of our dollars. They get it. How do they get our money? Individual taxes. When are taxes due? Normally April 15th. They get up to 48% of federal tax money comes from our individual income taxes. Corporate income taxes. This is always a big one because people think businesses should pay more money. Excise tax, 4% of taxes. Taxes on things like liquor, cigarettes, telephones, they're called the sin tax. Social Security is the second largest resource of income because it comes straight out of our checks. We don't even see it. Duties and tariffs collects money on things that people are bringing into the country from other countries. Federal spending, 50% of our federal budget goes to entitlement programs. What are they? Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, Medicaid. People have a problem with the word entitled. Here's what I know. If I paid into something, I am entitled to the benefits of it. Just like if I join a club and I pay my membership dues, whatever benefits are there, I should be able to take advantage of them because I've paid. That's what entitlement is. Now, you might hear it explained a whole nother way, but that's my interpretation of it. A good portion of our spending goes on the interest on our national debt, but it also goes on defense. I believe right now defense is the biggest budget item in our budget, period, which is a lot. The executive branch has what's known as the Office of Management and Budget, and this person creates the budget, or this office creates the budget, and then they send it to Congress. So this year, here we are, October 1st is come and gone, and that's when our fiscal year begins on the national level. And so everything has a line of order. So the budget goes in, they review it, it has to have revisions, it goes back and forth. So normally, under normal circumstances, the president would submit a budget to Congress between the first Monday in January and the first Monday in February. Exactly. We shall see how that works out. The legislative branch, the president submits the budget to the Congressional Budget Office. They prepared to send it to Congress. Congress has from March to September to approve it because the new fiscal year starts October 1st. You have what's known as the monetary policy, and that's where our Federal Reserve comes in. As we're changing administrations, you will hear a lot about some of these positions now because people will have questions about whether or not they are truly qualified to be in those positions, especially on the Federal Reserve and in the Office of Management and Budget. Those two positions, I believe, President-elect Biden announced who he would like and or who's on his list, and some people in the world of finance are not pleased with the two people that he's chosen. I don't know enough about the process to have an opinion, so I'm like, I don't know, but it's probably something I should research. Deficit, when the federal government revenues are less than expenditures, that's what a deficit is. You are spending out more than what you're bringing in. And that has been happening in America for a good little while now. That's why China, if they was to ever say we want our money, we would not be America because we couldn't pay that debt because we owe China so much money. And it's been accumulating over time, and in this last presidency, it has tripled. Our debt is 3 times higher than what it was when Trump came into office. So that's all I'll say about that. Reasons for a large debt: you have tax cuts without spending. Healthcare costs continue to rise, and that could be regulated, but it's not. Ways to reduce a debt require a balanced budget. Stop the Treasury from borrowing money. So there's ways that we could take and have a better handle on what our debt is. We have a trade policy that has been interesting during this administration. The U.S. does not produce enough goods. I bet if you looked at anything in your house, on your person, it's going to say made in China, made in Uruguay, made in Paraguay, made in Guatemala. It's going to be made somewhere. If you have something that was made in the USA, I would be shocked. Pleased, but shocked. Because we're not producing anything, and certain goods that we do produce aren't accepted. And so there's higher taxes on things such as that. And we've created a monster in these last couple of years with our trade policy. Our government regulations